Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Birds on the Wire podcast, brought to you by the Phantom Mentor Content Engine, brought to you from Phantom Mentor Content Studios. This is a podcast dedicated to the in-depth coverage of the St. Louis Cardinals Baseball Club. We talk baseball like the fans want to talk it, and we are glad to bring you this episode.
Welcome into the second edition of the Birds on the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Colin Surrey, alongside Josh Bobinet. And Josh, opening day, just wrapping up here as we bring this episode to you from the Phantom Mentor studio. And a little bit of a disappointing result, no doubt, with a 5-3 loss for the Cardinals. But a lot of excitement and just a really fun day with all the ex-players coming into town in the Clydesdale and the whole scene here in St. Louis.
Yeah, I was really excited to see, Lou Brock and Gibby, and just to see the full fleet of the Red Jackets arriving there after the Clydesdales. That's always a great thing. There's no doubt about it. Yes, it is unfortunate that it resulted in a 5-3 loss. They really had their opportunities, I believe, to get this thing done today, but it just didn't go their way, you know?
Well, definitely. Again, just a little bit disappointing. Alex Reyes, really a tough outing out of the bullpen, struggled with his command, walked a couple of guys, passed ball, and then gives up the bomb to Fernando Tatis Jr., which, how fitting, former Cardinal Fernando Tatis, his son, one of the top prospects in baseball, going deep against the Cardinals' top prospect in Alex Reyes, or I guess he just got that prospect status removed, but fresh off of that prospect status, and that really was the game sealer in this contest.
It was. I thought it was interesting that the St. Louis fans, being as knowledgeable as they're always said to be, they gave him a nice round of applause, being that his father played for the Cardinals, obviously. And now I bet they're regretting that, because he seemed very confident when he stepped up there and kind of sealed the deal. I thought that, Flaherty came out there looking pretty good. I can't be upset with his outing, 5 scoreless. But he labored for that, to get through that 5, and giving up 6 hits, I believe, and with 6 strikeouts. But he did get a decent start out of it. And then we go to the bullpen, and the bullpen's been looking pretty good. But I felt like Leon got squeezed, and that got the first 2 runs for the Pods, and then Reyes just didn't look sharp, and he didn't look sharp out of the gate. I mean, his stuff was lightning, as it always is, but it just, when they know where it's going to be, they're going to hit it out of the park.
Well, Reyes certainly struggling with his command of his secondary pitches in this outing, but back to Jack Flaherty, I think a lot of positive things to take out of his performance. Of course, a good job with that slider is just so nasty. And I thought he did a pretty decent job of going after hitters, which is typically his one issue as a pitcher, is keeping that pitch count down. But as you mentioned, the strike zone was very tight on both sides, and I think that really hurts a guy like Flaherty, a swing and miss guy, that you're kind of going to live more around the edges, try to get guys to chase a little bit more. And you saw the lefty starter for the Padres just attacking the zone, and what do you know, another soft-tossing lefty for the Padres ends up, or not for the Padres, for anyone, a soft-tossing lefty making their first appearance against the Cardinals always seems to get them. And once again, they struggled. But how interesting to see the Padres, that pitcher with only 54 pitches, the starter for San Diego, and he gets pulled very early on in the game after only 5 innings pitched, where he had been dominant, hadn't allowed a single run to that point. And then you see Renfroe come in to pinch hit for him and hits a huge home run that really kind of gave the Padres a lot of momentum at that point.
Well, it seems the manager Green over there for the Padres must have some sort of magic potion, because to pull your pitcher who's having a pretty damn good day and pinch hit, and the guy comes in and knocks one out of the park, that looked like he had a crystal ball over there of some sort, I thought that the thing is that we're starting to see a trend with the Cardinals, though, with a lot of strikeouts and kind of relying on the long ball, which they got a couple more today. Ozuna hits one through the right side to get us some runs early, get us a run early. But then again, the rest of the day it was just kind of looking for the long ball or not doing much of anything.
Well, as you mentioned, the Cardinals third in the National League in home runs. The Dodgers, with that explosion of 8 home runs on their opening day, has them all the way up to a total of 18. But again, the strikeouts have been extremely problematic for this Cardinals offense, and it's something that is translated into a lack of an ability to hit with runners in scoring position. Of course, you're going to do better with runners in scoring position if you can put some pressure on that defense, keep the ball in play. And so far, the Cardinals just have not been able to do that. And maybe the most alarming part of that is that a lot of these strikeouts are coming from the meat of the order, that 1 through 5, where you expect those guys to do a lot of damage, which they have. Some of them have, really, particularly the 1 through 3 part in the lineup have done some damage, but it has certainly come with the cost of some of those strikeouts as well. And runners in scoring position going to be a huge issue for this team, I think, if those strikeouts keep up.
Yeah, what we're seeing, we're seeing a lot of pop from the offense, so you got to be hopeful there. But leading the league in strikeouts, basically, I think going into today we were leading the majors in strikeouts as a team. So that third place in the National League in home runs is going to be tough to keep up with the leading the league in strikeouts. We're going to have to get just more hits in general, just more singles, more just bloop hits are fine. Something down the line, but anything that'll keep us from whiffing when we got guys in scoring position.
Well, definitely, and some of those guys, some of the lack of getting those singles, there's been maybe a little bit of bad luck for some of these guys with batted balls in play. It's been tough, especially for Yadier Molina, putting the ball in play, but he's not really getting those hits that we're used to seeing.
Right, and Carpenter's hitting into the shift again, kind of just like he did to start off last year. I mean, he eventually found a way, changed his launch angle and started doing more damage. But I've seen him ground into the hole at least 3 or 4 times just as the years began.
And he's one of those guys that you expect him to turn it around and get it going. And Goldschmidt has also kind of struggled with the strikeouts, but of course, the pop has certainly been there. That 3 home run day that got the Cardinals their lone win in their opening series against the Brewers, that was absolutely huge for this team. But you just wonder what it means for run production when so many of these big bats that you're relying on are also guys that are going to strike out. And then, of course, you mentioned, too, the lefty in Carpenter, pulls the ball to the right side quite a bit and hits into the shift. That's going to take some hits away as well. So really someplace that I'm looking for the Cardinals to kind of pick up that slack is the 4 through 6 hitters have been incredibly unproductive so far this season.
Yeah.
Ozuna has had no pop whatsoever so far this year. Yadier Molina in the 5-hole, I kind of struggle with that. It's hard for me to see him as a 5-hitter, and Dexter Fowler has primarily been batting 6th, and it's tough to justify putting him in the lineup altogether. And I guess the same really could be said about Marcell Ozuna at this point.
Well, I mean, you got Yachty hitting a 071 to start the year. You got Fowler hitting 111 to start the year. So both of them have been abysmal. Yachty always gets the golden pass, so to speak, because he's our catcher. But you're hitting him high in the order, so if you're going to be relying on him, we need more production. Obviously, certainly not 71. Hitting 071, but we're going to need some production. Ozuna he's hitting 240 so far. But the thing about Ozuna, and we talk about his health, But the truth is if you look at his career, his years have looked most of his years have looked a little more like last year than they did the year that he broke out and then came over to the Cardinals.
Absolutely.
So he's had 3 different years where he hit exactly 23 home runs, including last year. So and in those years he had about 80 RBIs, and he hit around 260 to 280, and that doesn't kind of resemble the 312, 37 homers of 2017, the year before he arrived. We've seen a much different hitter. Now, last year we saw glimpses of great power, and we just always kind of said, well, the shoulder's, ailing. But here we go again, and we need some production out of him. He gets the big base hit today, but we're not, we're certainly looking for some slugging percentage out of him. We're looking for some extra base hits.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of the thing when you trade for a guy like Marcell Ozuna to come in and be your cleanup hitter. You're expecting that level of extra base hits and production that just has not been there so far. And then when you add on top of it, he's come into this season about 25 pounds overweight. He looks like he's really laboring in the outfield. Not only is the arm bad in the outfield, but he's not covering a lot of ground, especially in that first series against Milwaukee. Just a number of balls that dropped in front of him that you would think he could cover and make that catch. And that really was one of the big things when the Cardinals traded for Marcell Ozuna. He was a Gold Glove level left fielder at that point. And of course, your left fielder is not going to be the same level of outfielder that you have in center or right, but really it's just another compounding factor where when you have guys on the bench like Tyler O'Neill and Jose Martinez, how long can you keep trotting a guy out there, and not only trotting him out there, but putting him in such an important part of the lineup in the cleanup spot and continue to get that lack of production for the Cardinals? So it'll be interesting to see where the playing time gets split up in the outfield moving forward. And of course, we're only, 2 series and 1 game into the season, and we were kind of wondering, in our first episode, what kind of a leash are we going to see on a Dexter Fowler? And now we kind of have the question raised of how long until we see Marcell Ozuna's playing time being cut into.
Yeah, I think we kind of hit the nail on the head with that conversation in episode 1, because things have kind of unfolded in a way that resemble what we were talking about. I'm pretty sure it was the game that Dakota Hudson started on the 30th. Maybe I'm getting my game mixed up, but I won't have my play mixed up, okay? Where they're in the shift and a ball gets blooped in the left and Carpenter goes back on it because he's pretty much alone over there, and it drops in front of Ozuna. And Carpenter looks up at Ozuna like, where are you, And I think it relates to him laboring to get in on the ball, as you said. And so I think we've seen times with him that, do you think he's really that much overweight? You think, is it 20, 25 pounds, you think?
Oh, he looks very big to me. I mean, and you can just kind of see it in the way that he's moving. He just kind of looks lackadaisical out there compared to how he looked even last year. And last year was kind of a big step back defensively for him from that year previous where he broke out in Miami.
Yeah, most people relate it to the arm trouble, but yeah, also just going back on balls and how he looks in terms of his mobility wasn't very good. But we also hit on the fact, well, the other thing I wanted to point out was that Martinez, I was looking forward to the game that he started the other day because I was like, if he busts out here, he's going to create a whole bunch of problems for Ozuna and Fowler, But he didn't do anything. I think he was 0 for 5. So he basically bought them some more time to be as bad as they've been and still get a chance to get out there every day. But the thing that kind of blew me away is that both Wong and Bader, we were talking about that 7 and 8 combo, how dangerous that could be, and they've been exactly that. So if we start looking back at the 2 series that we've seen so far, right out of the gate, opening day of the season, Wong has a 2-homer day and goes back-to-back with Bader. And it's been pretty positive from those two the whole way so far.
Absolutely, and it really has me wondering if that 4 through 6 part in the lineup is producing, what kind of damage they would be doing with that power production down at the bottom of the lineup. Right now, Colton Wong's still slugging almost near 1,000. I mean, he has been tearing the cover off the ball to this point, but the problem is no one's been on base for him to do any damage with. So,
yes,
it's one of those things where you can have productive guys in the lineup, but if there isn't that level of synergy in the lineup really kind of meshing with itself, which really has kind of been a huge problem for the Cardinals so far. And of course, strikeouts are not going to aid that. You're not going to move runners over. You're not going to keep putting that pressure on the defense like we've talked about. And it's really kind of one of those things where you wonder how long until this lineup gets shuffled around, or until you start making replacements with a Fowler and Ozuna, because again, I know Jose Martinez off to a bit of a slow start, 0 for 5, as you mentioned, in that start, that lone start that he's had this year. But it's one of those things that really bothered me about Mike Matheny, where a guy could just have one bad day and then you're yanked out of the lineup after that. At some point, you have to have faith in the guys that you know are going to go out there and produce. And for some reason, it seems like we have faith in the guys that don't have that level of production lately. Not to say that Ozuna and Fowler haven't produced in the past, but you look at what they've done last year, and really the thing for Ozuna with me so far is just an eye test sort of thing. Mm-hmm. He does not look good on multiple fronts, and especially at the plate, the way he's kind of spinning off. And it's again kind of what we saw, as you mentioned, at the beginning of last year, where it's hard to ever see him getting that power production when he's just bailing out and just opening his hips up so early and unable to have that fluid kind of swing where he keeps his weight on his back foot and really kind of drives through the ball instead of kind of reaching out and rolling over a lot of balls to the left side of the infield so far.
Yeah, I see your point, and in terms of his weight and his mobility, but in also you see basically a guy that might be trying to get in shape while the season's going on, and it's very surprising to see him do that because he's in a contract year, correct? So he's got big money on the line when it comes to coming in out of shape, and he spent time dyeing his beard orange, but we need him to spend some time getting in shape when the off season, so yeah, that's been disappointing to see him, and it leads me back to one of our conversations in episode 1, which was that we're seeing ego in contract ahead of production, because O'Neill's been already better than either one of Fowler or Ozuna in spot playing time, right? So it's kind of like he needs to be out there more, and right now I just feel more comfortable with the idea of Martinez being out there too, because he's going to take better at bats. He's had some bad luck, but I just know that his at-bats are going to be more productive on a consistent basis. So I find myself not wanting to see this movie unfold the way it's unfolding. I find myself wanting to just make the jump to those other two guys and see if you can get the production out of his Ozuna, or get him healthy so he's throwing better, or get him in shape, I guess. I don't know. I mean, he's certainly in better shape than me, and probably you.
Definitely in better shape than me. But you know what? We're not professional athletes, and we don't get paid millions of dollars to do that.
That's right, and that's why we have a podcast. Because
that's right. You know what? He doesn't get paid the podcast. Not that we do either.
My voice is in good shape. Your voice is in good shape. We've done our job.
Exactly.
So if we go back and we look at the Milwaukee series, okay, we come out of the gate, we lose 1-5-4 to jump out, right? Wong hits 2 bombs, Bader hits a bomb. It was kind of a home run fest there. Moustakas smokes one. Yelich, I mean, let's just not even talk about that guy. I mean, he's going to be
my goodness.
He's going to be problems. Can you believe that we had the option of Ozuna or Yelich, and we took Ozuna?
Well, that's one that's going to haunt the franchise for a while, I would imagine. And it really kind of comes down to you look at the way both of them handle the game, and you look at a guy in Ozuna who just clearly didn't take care of himself in the offseason, and then you look at a guy like Christian Yelich, who, coming off of an MVP season, and reporters asking him about that breakout, incredible season that he's had. Not that he hadn't broken out before; he was already an excellent player, but not an MVP type player like he was last year. And Yelich's response is how he was upset that they didn't win the World Series, and it's all about winning for him and how motivated he was to work in the offseason and continue to get better. And you've clearly seen that. And I think the Cardinals have kind of taken some chances on guys that don't necessarily have that attitude. You look at a Carlos Martinez, same kind of issue, all the talent in the world, and then he comes out of spring training and hasn't taken care of the shoulder and isn't ready to pitch. And it's just extremely frustrating.
I hate to say that about Carlos because I've heard a lot of people, kind of bang on him a little bit about, him being a goof, and I've always thought he was an entertaining guy, and he was certainly a lights out pitcher over the first few years of his career, but we are not too far in his career, and he's sitting on the sidelines right now when we could really use him to be we could use him to be the number one. I mean, Michaelis is strong, and Flaherty's on his way, but we would all have to agree that we believed that Carlos Martinez was going to be, a top 10, top 15 National League or Major League pitcher. So it is a negative thing, and it relates to Ozuna in terms of them not having maybe the attitude required to be a winner long term. When you look at Yelich, it kind of relates to that conversation we had about Tyler O'Neill's body type. Yelich is the body type I'm talking about, like born to play baseball, like a miniature Ted Williams type body, like slender and quick bat and fluid, and everything he does looks like he's been trained to do it. Whereas like you said with Ozuna, he looks like everything's a bit of a labor because he's carrying around a little too much bulk, So. Yep. So. And you talk about kind of how this team could use Carlos Martinez, and the bottom line is that this starting pitching staff needs to start going deeper in the games, and they're going to need to start throwing more innings. And luckily, the Cardinals do have some guys in the bullpen that you can count on to go multiple innings, but it's one of those situations where over the course of a season, how does that hold up? You can't continue to have guys who barely get through 5 innings. You see it again with Jack Flaherty today. Only 5 innings, and this is a guy that you're looking to be essentially a secondary ace on your staff, and 5 innings at a time is just not going to get it done. And you look at a guy like Adam Wainwright, doesn't have the stuff to necessarily come at hitters anymore, and all of these guys have sort of struggled with command and walks so far. And when you're not going after hitters and you're not challenging guys, that's when you're going to get into trouble not going deep in the ballgame. Well, I harped a little bit on Waka, and I think overall he's had the best start of the season so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah, his outing, he didn't look, I wouldn't say he looked dominant, but he certainly was effective, and he got him 7 innings. So you have to say that that's the top start of the season so far. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. He was excellent in his first start, going out there, only allowing 1 run, and really kind of was the opposite of what we talked about with all these other guys, where he really came at hitters and controlled his pitch count a little bit, allowed them to go deeper into the game, and that's going to make a big difference for this team. And when I think about the way that this bullpen is setting up, something that's interesting to me is, when are we going to move John Brebbia into a bigger role here? Because this guy is absolutely dominant against right-handed hitters. And when the lineup warrants it, and when you do have those right-handers coming up, he's got to be your number one option as that setup guy in the eighth inning, don't you think?
Yeah. Again, this is another example of ego. Whether it's the coaching staff's ego or the front office's ego, the idea that these are the guys that we've put in this position to play this part on the team, so they get a chance to fail first, right? Well, no, I'm sorry. There's guys like Brebbia that maybe doesn't throw 102 like Hicks, right? But he is getting people out all the time. So, and he's got command. I mean, he struck out. Yeah. He struck out a few guys today, back to back. So
struck out 4 batters over 2 innings.
4 batters over 2 innings. I think that guy deserves to get the ball. And I'm sure he will get the ball on a regular basis. I think that what we're saying is that he might need to get the ball in some very important situations, right?
Exactly. And, of course, we saw Dominic Leone give up a couple of runs today, but I really liked what I've seen out of Dominic Leone as well, and I think if you can have him as that bridge guy into the 8th inning and then piece something together with a Brebbia and a Miller in the 8th and then go to Hicks in the 9th, I think that can potentially be an excellent end of the bullpen.
Well, I thought that Leone looked fantastic in the first series of the year, and I thought that today he looked good too. He gets squeezed by a tight strike zone, ends up in a walk on a pitch that I thought should have been called a strike, and then that walk leads to him hanging a slider that gets knocked out of the park. That was obviously a bad pitch, but it was kind of circumstantial in a way too. It wasn't like Reyes, who basically just didn't have the command from the get-go. But Reyes hasn't been bad this year, so I mean, and he's taken the ball several times. He hasn't looked bad. But Leone, I have to agree with you. I think he's going to be just a really, really important part of this bullpen.
Absolutely, and Dominic Leone, I think I'll cut him a little bit of slack on that home run, just from the standpoint that it's a first pitch slider, and while it wasn't a great pitch, how often do you have guys coming off of the bench and ready to hit an off-speed pitch out of the ballpark on the first pitch? Not very often. Kind of one of those get-me-over breaking balls to start the at-bat, and the hitter was ready for it, and at a certain point, you just kind of got to tip your cap,
Yeah, well, he got it way over, though. That was a spinner. That was a hanger. So, I mean, that looked like it was sitting on a tee by the time it got to the plate. It didn't have any break to it. So, even though it is off speed, and that could have caused somebody to miss it, if that guy's even thinking slider, and he hangs that ball like that, it's going to end up in a different county. So yeah, he just made a bad pitch there. But let's say that he doesn't give up that walk, and he gets then it's a solo shot, and it probably ends up we probably end up with a different ball game.
If he doesn't give up that walk and that ends up in a strikeout, he doesn't even ever face that hitter. It's one of those situations with 2 outs. Really a momentum changer in the game.
I had forgot there was 2 outs at that point. Yes, so yeah, that was that squeeze and then hanging the slider. That was a big moment in the game. So in going back again to the Milwaukee series to start the year, if we backtrack and try to just kind of analyze the games, in our second game we come back and we win 9-5. Goldschmidt has a day, knocking 3 balls out of the park. I think that's what we hired him for. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you've seen his impact not only at the plate, but what he does defensively as well for this squad. I believe it was in that game he did an amazing job turning a double play.
Oh yeah, that
from
play
first
was
base.
big.
The ball was hit to him. He threw it over to second base, recovered, got back to the bag, and then was able to put away the second out for the double play. And it's just another example of the fundamentals and athleticism that this player possesses and how he's going to be an asset all the way around. And, of course, you see the home run today, a little bit of a meaningless home run, unfortunately, because no one was able to pick him up afterwards and kind of continue the rally. But 5 home runs already on this season, I think it'd be tough to ask much more of Paul Goldschmidt so far.
Absolutely. He's been more than we could have expected, we got to admit. That double play in the 6th in that second game against Milwaukee was a gold glove play for Goldie. So I thought something interesting happened in that game is they walked Yelich, and that's that game where Braun hit the next hit, came up and hit one out right after that. And did you see where he was crossing the plate and he goes, "You see that? They walk you to get to me," you know? And I was kind of like, Braun, you know, like, I don't like you for a reason. I think it's, you know, because of course we're going to walk Yelich to get you, Braun. I mean, even though it didn't work out for us, I mean, Yelich is just killing us. So
well, it's a matchup deal at that point too. You got Jack Flaherty on the mound, a right-hander with a nasty wipeout slider, so tough on right-handed bats, and Braun is a guy that has struggled with the slider. You can get him down and away with that slide piece, and unfortunately just left one up over the plate, and a guy like Ryan Braun is gonna make you pay. And boy, that Brewers lineup is it's something else. I mean, you get no break throughout the whole lineup.
No, you do not. You do not. You know, to think that Moustakas is hitting down in their lineup, like, oh my God, you know, like, because I mean, he had a couple laser beams.
Hitter, and then you're looking at Grandal, who hit about 25 home runs last year in a pitcher's ballpark.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, they can hit. That team can hit, and they're 6-1 for a reason. I mean, they've won a lot of one-run ball games, which is also interesting. I mean, Hader is pretty much a badass, you know. So,
oh my goodness, you know, he had that immaculate inning against us where he went 9 pitches, 9 strikes. I believe 8 of them were swinging, and he was just piping fastballs right down the middle. And it's got to be a deception mechanics type of deal with him because no one was picking him up.
They cannot pick up the ball with that guy, so it's obvious. Like, whatever he's doing, that ball probably looks like a blur coming in there. You know, there's some pitchers that, you know, they throw a ball up there. In my experience, I've seen them, man. There's guys I've faced that they throw a ball up there and it's clear. I mean, they might throw hard. They might be hard thrower, but that ball is clear. And there's guys that are deceptive that throw that ball up there and it looks like a wiffle ball. I mean, it looks like you can't pick it up just right. So I think he's got to be one of those guys because he makes people look silly sometimes.
Well, you know, it kind of reminds me of Trevor Rosenthal when he was coming up and was so dominant for those first 2 or 3 years for the Cardinals. And, you know, again, a guy that throws very hard, but there are guys that throw harder, and just something about the way that, you know, he would throw the ball and it has that little extra life to it at the very end. Guys just swinging under the ball, and man, Hader has just been incredibly impressive so far this year.
Yeah, he makes me think of, we're going back quite a few years, but it makes me think of Brad Lidge when he was like dominant in the league in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. Just like people just couldn't pick up his ball, you know. Of course, Pujols once picked up his ball and hit it over a railroad track, but that was Pujols in his prime, so he pretty much
right. And if I remember correctly, that was a hanging slider, so maybe Lidge would have been better off sticking with the heater in that situation.
I think so. So we lose the first one. We come back. We win 9-5. Carp gets his 1,000th hit, by the way, in that game. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
And although he hasn't been terribly productive overall, he's been manageable. You know, like, you know, you don't look at these games and say that Carpenter's the problem. So he's hit enough balls well that you can see that he'll come out of it and he'll be heading in the right direction, right? And then,
absolutely, Carpenter is definitely the least of my worries with this lineup so far. And there's a certain way that you kind of see guys, the at-bats that they're taking and just the way that they look at the plate. You know, Carpenter looks like he's close to breaking out and doing something. And, you know, you saw last year, he's one of those guys that when he goes on a tear, look out, because he can absolutely light it up. And, Paul Goldschmidt's kind of that way as well. So if they both catch fire at the same time, this lineup is going to be really tough to deal with. And you look at a guy like Paul DeJong hitting in the 3 spot has been incredibly consistent so far, and that was maybe one of the knocks on him so far in his career. Really looks like he's taken another step forward again this year.
Yeah, I mean, my lineup has, DeJong there, Ozuna there, Martinez in there, or O'Neill in there, so if you start stacking those guys in there to protect the top of the lineup, I just think you could have a very, very productive lineup, especially if Wong. The thing I like about the start by Wong, by the way, is that, it is so much easier to have a good season when you come out of the gate hot, because a batting average doesn't seem to drop as fast when you come out and you get some hits early. It certainly doesn't seem to climb very fast when you start in a slump, right? So the fact that Wong came out and got his numbers, got 10 hits in the first 2 series, right? It's made it to where you could see him having really a break. Could be the breakout year that we were talking about for him. But and then you see a lineup that is completely loaded. If you see Molina come back and just start hitting like Yachty, we don't need too much, but just hit like Yachty, and we figure out which one of Ozuna or Fowler are going to have to sit it down so we can get somebody else in there. I guess we can't say that yet, but you know what I'm alluding to, because it just seems like that if you take these contracts out of the mix, you take the egos out of the mix, that you've got to see Martinez and O'Neill more, and you've got to see Ozuna and Fowler less. And the combination of how that works, I'll leave that part to Schilt. I want him to listen to me about everything else, but he can make the final decision on what the exact math is. But got to see more O'Neill, got to see more Martinez if we're going to have that stacked lineup that I think we could have. Going back to your point about DeJong, he's doing fine. So we just need to have some production behind him so that we don't have this dead spot in the middle,
Absolutely. And going back to what you said about Colton Wong, I think it's an excellent point. You think back to earlier in his career, and baseball is certainly one of those sports that so much of it is played between the ears, and it's such a mind game. And Colton Wong kind of struggled with confidence, and especially with Matheny, consistent playing time, I think, was an issue, and the communication there, whether he was comfortable with his situation, I think was a huge issue for him. And certainly Mike Schilt has helped a ton, and I give Mike Schilt a lot of credit for Colton Wong's success early on in the season. And really he's one of those guys now that, it seems like just yesterday, he's one of the top prospects in the organization, but Colton Wong is a veteran at this point. He's been out there for plenty of seasons now, and I think he's finally comfortable in his own skin out there on the field, and we're really starting to see that kind of come to fruition here this year as he has gotten off to that great start that you talk about. And I think it's going to really help the top of that lineup, having somebody like Wong that can be productive at the bottom and have people for Carpenter to drive in, have a rally going when Goldschmidt comes to the plate. But as you mentioned, that middle of the lineup, it's great to go with this new school approach of, on base, and a little bit of slug too in both of those spots in the Cardinals situation. But then when you've got the ducks on the pond, you have to have the guys to drive them in. And you talked about DeJong doing a nice job in that 3 spot, but the 4 through 6 holes have just been absolutely anemic to this point, and the importance of those spots in the order cannot be understated. And so far, the Cardinals, kind of don't have anyone to blame but themselves as they've put a guy like Ozuna in the cleanup spot. And I'm not sure that I feel comfortable with Molina batting 5th, period. I mean,
yeah, you mentioned
for me, I would like to see a Carpenter, Goldschmidt, Young, maybe O'Neill in the cleanup spot, and then a Jose Martinez batting fifth, and then all of a sudden you look at Molina batting sixth, Wong and Bader, and now that just looks like an incredibly dangerous lineup.
That's my lineup. I'm just going to say it as clear as day. That is my lineup. My lineup has O'Neill and Martinez in the outfield and has Ozuna and Fowler on the bench. I think that it's completely about egos. I think that they have hopes for Ozuna, they have hopes for Fowler, and they are also worried that you bench those two guys and you're gonna have a bad clubhouse in a lot of ways. You're gonna have some upset players, you know. And right now, you have a happy Martinez with a new contract and a happy O'Neill because he doesn't expect anything but to be in the big leagues. So you can easily set those guys down and not have them be upset. You set down Fowler and Ozuna, you're going to have two hotheads probably upset about their playing time. So maybe that's got to do with it as well.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because this is a similar story. We're kind of used to hearing this Cardinal fans at this point. You think back to last year with Tommy Pham, and it wasn't even that his production was that bad. It was kind of seems like the trade was really just to kind of get rid of some bad PR and maybe a poisonous, a cancerous part of the clubhouse, and then see what he did in Tampa Bay in the second half, just absolutely tore the cover off the ball. And I'll tell you what, how good would a Tommy Pham look in this lineup right now if you could slot him in there and then move everybody else another spot down. I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing to think about if you're a Cardinal fan at this point.
It is, and we've talked about Luke Voigt. We've talked about I mentioned Matt Adams from a few years back, but we've got that rectified because we've got Goldie, right? But this outfield situation, we have kind of. That's one of those examples where, Tommy Pham would look great out there. But I think they did kind of move him because the personality was not meshing in a certain way. And so when he was up, he was, a clubhouse leader. When he was irritated, he was hard to deal with. So, and I don't know for a fact exactly the dynamic, but it just seemed apparent. You can see people's attitudes on the field when they're upset about teammates or they're upset about something going on in the clubhouse. And Pham certainly had those ups and downs.
Well, and it's one of those things where he was not shy about being vocal of thinking that the Cardinals had really held him back most of his career. And, to be honest, you can't really argue with him. I mean, look at the production that he had when he made it up to the major league level and the way that he produced in the minor leagues. Of course, he had those eye issues and struggled with production for some stints in between there, but the production you were already getting at the major league level in the outfield at those times kind of warranted Tommy Pham to get his shot earlier. And I think just that bad blood moving forward was something that he was kind of never able to get over. And at a certain point, you have to kind of look at the organization at this point in the front office and ask, are they doing their homework on these players? You look at bringing in a guy like Ozuna who's not working out in the offseason like he should. You look at bringing in a guy like Dexter Fowler who, when things have gone poorly for him, he hasn't necessarily responded the way that you would hope. And these are both guys that were not homegrown players. Fowler, a free agent signing, and Ozuna, you went out and gave up a lot in order to get him. I mean, Sandy Alcantara went 8 innings scoreless in his first start this year for the Miami Marlins. So you really kind of look back at it, and it's one of those situations where not only do you have to look at the kind of player that you're getting in terms of production, but personalities and fits within the clubhouse matter as well.
Absolutely. So I think we can look at that Milwaukee series and say that that series we could have came out of that 0-4 or 4-0. It was a very close series. Okay, so when we look at the Milwaukee matchup, we can see that Milwaukee's going to be trouble. There's no way to spin it. They're going to be trouble. So then we move past them and we get into a 2-game series with the Pirates, correct? And you know, we didn't look necessarily dominant over the Pirates in any way, but we did show a lot of heart in coming back and winning some ball games.
Definitely, the grittiness was there in both of those contests. Come from behind extra inning wins in both cases, but again, really rearing its ugly head was the loss in that series, that short series, and luckily the bullpen, with some outstanding performances, able to steady the ship and kind of allow the team to make those comebacks. But again, kind of shaky starting pitching performances, and something that we're going to have to look forward to in this season. How aggressive are those starters, and are they going to be able to get deeper into games? Because early in the season, it's something that you can kind of cover up and make up for it because everyone's arms are fresh. You don't have a ton of injuries at this point. But as attrition starts to set in throughout the season, we are just going to have the starters get more innings for this team. And again, it goes back to attacking those hitters and not giving up the walks.
Right. And I think that we both, I mean, I can't speak for you, but I think that we both know that Wainwright's going to be a nibbler who gets through about 5 innings.
I agree completely.
You know, so he's going to be, when you're nibbling, you're going to always be looking at lots of walks. You're going to look at a high pitch count, and you're going to look at hitters counts where you've got to come in, and that's where it gets dangerous. So I think we're going to see that out of Wainwright, and we can't really expect anything else. But we'll see how that develops. But we don't need it from the rest of these guys. We need them to attack the strike zone. We need them to pitch to contact. We need them to keep their pitch counts down so that we can get them deeper in the game. Again, it's the first week of April. Often we see pitchers, you know, struggle with their command early on. But I think that's a very clear thing we need to keep our eye on going forward.
Well, absolutely. The Cardinals are right now 5th in the National League in walks. And, you know, of course, music to Cardinal fans' ears. The Cubs leading that list with walks. The Cubs have just been off to a horrendous start so far. But it's, so it's something that we can be happy about over here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot to be happy with, considering that we're 3-4 and we're in second place.
Right.
You know, it's just proof that maybe the rest of the league and the whole National League is pretty dangerous in a lot of ways. So yeah, you know, the Cubs come out of the gate 1-5, not looking good at all. And you said we're 5th in the league in giving up walks, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, see, that's got to stop. So we've got some very some numbers that really are glaring. We've got lots of home runs, lots of strikeouts from our offense, lots of home runs from our offense. And then we've got a pitching staff that's giving up a lot of walks. Those 3 things are not. They are not conducive to a winning environment long term. So those numbers have to shift at least into some sort of middle range, happy medium within the league. You know, let's get into the 15 zone or something with those numbers, okay?
Yep. And, you know, I think certainly it's still very early, still a very small sample size. But, you know, there's things that you can't ignore to this point. You know, we've only seen what we have seen so far. And I think especially the questions with the pitching staff are legitimate and something that you can look at long term. How are these guys going to hold up? You know, and I'm very interested to see what does a guy like Dakota Hudson give you moving forward. You know, really tough matchup going up against the Brewers in his first start. I mean, man, you want to talk about a difficult situation in your first really kind of season where you came in knowing you're going to be a part of the starting rotation and you got to go on the road and face the Brewers in a crazy favorable hitter's ballpark. Just a tough situation for him. But I think when it's all said and done at the end of the year, in terms of innings, we're going to look at Miles Mikolas leading that list. And not far behind him, I believe Dakota Hudson has the kind of stuff, and with that sinker ball and the kind of pitcher that he's been in the minor league, much more of a pitch-to-contact guy compared to a Jack Flaherty, who might end up having a lower ERA and be the better pitcher in terms of run prevention. But Dakota Hudson, I think, is going to have to give this team a lot of innings moving forward if they want to preserve that bullpen and keep that bullpen effective with guys so that they can keep their arms fresh and keep guys slotted into roles where they're comfortable instead of, a lot of multiple inning performances from John Brebbia so far, where we've already talked about. I think he would look very good in a role where you're matching him up against very good right-handed pitchers late in the game in high leverage roles.
Right. We see Dakota Hudson come out for his first start in the third game of that Milwaukee series, looking nice in some powdered blue. But I think, until Goldie drops that ball, that ball in his chest, and then the home,
a little flipper that wonks on his leg.
He zinged it at him, and it was a tough play. But he drops that ball. Goldie's been great defensively so far, so no issues there. It was just a bad break. But then the home run comes right after that from Moustakas, and the error ends up hurting them. I think overall Hudson had a very good performance, and then he came back the other night and pitched a little relief and basically pitched us to a victory. With guys on base. So Hudson's an important part of this pitching staff one way or another. Watching him come out of the bullpen made me a little bit kind of think, well, maybe Gant in the starting rotation and Hudson back in the bullpen, but I'm just that was just a thought that crossed my mind. I think Hudson could give us I think he's ready, and I think he could give us a ton of innings. And we were talking about Hendricks last time and with the Cubs, and I think Hudson has that kind of stuff. I mean, his stuff is better in terms of power. He has more heat, but he also has a ball that moves a lot. You can just see it. He's got a lot of sink on his pitches. So.
Absolutely, and he's going to be a guy that's not afraid to come at hitters. He's going to induce that weak contact, and when he does get runners on base, I think he could very well lead this staff and induce double plays. So, it's interesting to see the Cardinals decide to go to him in the bullpen, and it's one of those situations where, there was so much talk in the offseason about, do the Cardinals go with 12 pitchers or 13 pitchers? And it kind of makes you think this early into the season when you're already using a guy that's projected to be in your starting rotation for the entire season, you're having to use him out of the bullpen. And meanwhile, a guy like Drew Robinson, who just got optioned down today for Jed Gurko, is finally healthy again. Haven't really seen any playing time, and it's the same situation you wonder with Mike Matheny, where they had gone to 13 pitchers, but then Matheny would kind of not utilize that extra pitcher that he was getting in the bullpen. I think Schultz is the kind of guy that has a shorter hook on guys in the bullpen. Of course, I say that. I think he might have let Reyes go a little bit too deep today, but I think this team could use 13 pitchers.
I did have that same instinct when Reyes started struggling. I was like, go get him now. I mean, he doesn't look good. Go get him now. And just, he's been pitching a lot. Go get him now and get somebody out there who can throw strikes and just not let this fall on Reyes, because all I want Reyes to feel now is healthy. That's all I want out of him, is that he feels healthy, that he feels confident, and that he continues to grow. I mean, we need to use him in these situations, but today I would have been very quick with the hook when I saw him laboring the way he was, just lack of command,
Well, and I think you said it with the confidence, The more you let a guy go out there and kind of beat a dead horse when he doesn't have the stuff, you're just kind of reinforcing that lack of confidence. And that is a guy that you're going to really need come the end of the season to be in a prominent role, whether it be in the starting rotation or in a key part of the bullpen, to be a big part of this ball club. If you really want to realize your full potential and make a run at the World Series, like I know this team thinks that they can, and it kind of goes back to the same thing that, you heard a lot from the front office talking about. We're all in this year, and I kind of have to question, if you're all in this year, then why is Fowler getting the nod? I mean, right. You can say what you want, but your actions at the end of the day speak much louder. And so far, kind of the same stuff, right?
In a way, I'll give him a little more time. If I see this at all going on towards the end of April into May, that's going to be way too long. So, you can play with this a little bit longer, in my opinion. I'm not happy to see it, but, I don't manage the team. You know what I mean? I don't pay the players. So okay, you want to try it, you can try it, but it cannot last much longer. If we're still seeing this lack of production and not putting the right guys out there because of, again, ego and contract, then you can't say you're all in for winning. And so we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. So we come out of the Brewers and the Pirates series with a 3-3 record. We drop one today in the with the Padres. We're going to have another game with the Padres tomorrow. So I have a couple questions for you as we get ready to head out today for today's episode. Did you happen to catch the Graham Benzinger interview with Albert Pujols, or any portion of that?
I did not see it.
Pujols, if you get a chance, check it out. That is actually shot by a couple guys from Southern Illinois. That show is, but Albert basically, he took a couple shots at the Cardinals about how his contract was handled towards the end of his career, and he's getting ready to come into town in June. This will be the first time back. So I was interested to hear your take on that. Well, maybe we'll talk about it next time we get together for an episode next week.
Well, I'll say this, that, he's going to take a shot at the Cardinals in the way that they handle the contract situation. But if you look at it, the Cardinals really were ahead of the curve on that one, where you see in the game of baseball now, teams are not looking to pay players for past production anymore. That's just a thing of the past. They're looking at what you're projecting to be in the future, and they're going to pay you accordingly to that, as you should, and it's one of those situations where it's unfortunate the way that the players union has negotiated their deals in a way that, the teams have so much team control for up to 7 years, when, that could be all the way through a player's prime, unless you're one of these phenoms that comes up at age 20, 21, and it's a situation where these guys' best years are already past, and then they're hitting free agency and wanting this huge contract and wanting to be kind of compensated for production that they've had in the past, when teams just aren't willing to do that anymore.
Yes, I agree. Interesting interview. You check it out when you get a chance. Okay, my last question for you before we go and end episode 2 of the Birds on a Wire podcast. What's your over? We didn't talk about this in the first episode, which is strange, but what's your over-under on Cardinals victories for the season?
Cardinals victories. So coming into the season, my heart was telling me 94-ish wins, and then I kind of took into account a little bit more, the division has kind of gotten a little bit better. We've seen how good the Brewers are last year, and that was a little bit of a surprise. Everyone expected them to be better, but not to the level that they were last year, and you have to take that into account now. And I think when you kind of account for how difficult the division is, I would put it at about 91, 92 wins for the Cardinals. Where are you at?
I was going to say 90. It's right at 90 for me. I think that I think that we win the division if we go over that. I think because it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be tons of. I don't think there's going to be a 100-win team in the Central. Although the Brewers are trying to make a point right out of the gate that they might be destined for a lot of victories because the combination of what they have, lights out closer, decent starting pitching, and a lot of bats. They could be dangerous and they could maybe pull it off. But I don't think. I think you'll see them level out. I think they'll come back to the pack, and I think you'll see a whole bunch of NL Central teams fighting for a wild card / division title at the same time. I think it's going to take. I think it's going to take about 92 to 93 wins to win the Central, but I think the Cardinals will be in that 90-win range. So they'll be on the cusp. So we'll see.
All right.
Well, Colin, let's go ahead and wrap up the second episode of Birds on the Wire podcast. Everybody out there, we want to say thank you for listening to this episode, and we're going to try to bring you a new episode every week. So tune in next week and see what the Cardinals are up to when me and Colin talk Cardinal baseball.
Birds on the Wire podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Take it easy.